Hi, I'm Congressman Scott Peters, and I'm talking to you on day 3 of the shutdown. It's Monday, and as I sit here, we're waiting for the Senate to take their vote at noon. Let's talk a little bit about how we got here. Our country's fiscal year ends on September 30th, and last September 30th, it ended with no approved budget for the next year. Now, Congress is supposed to pass a budget, and appropriations bills, those are the ones that allocate money for federal spending before the next fiscal year begins. That makes sense, right? But that didn't happen. So Mr. Ryan and Mr. McConnell asked us for an extension. Congress passed, and I supported that extension, called a continuing resolution from September 30th to December 8th, so that the Republicans in the House and the Senate could agree with President Trump on a budget, which would be a late budget, for the rest of the year until next September. Now, before December 8th, we passed another continuing resolution to December 22nd, again with the assurance from Republican leadership that they would produce a budget by then, and I supported that extension also. But you know how this goes, right? There was no budget plan by December 22nd. They asked for another continuing resolution to give them to January 19th, last Friday. That passed too, but I voted against it because, as you can see, this is getting ridiculous. And now, once again, they did not use that time to produce a budget by January 19th. Instead, they asked us for another month with no apparent new strategy to produce a budget, which they continue not to do. And it passed, but again, I voted no. Now, I understand, look, I'm a Democrat, I'm in the minority, I may not get as much out of a budget as I like. But I'd like to see the Republicans, who control the House, the Senate, and the White House, at least come up with a budget that we can debate, amend, and vote on. And I know that President Trump is not predictable. We've all seen that, and that must be really frustrating for my Republican colleagues. And I know that a lot of them have just decided they don't want to work with Democrats at all because they feel that that's risky for their base. But that's the role of leadership in Congress. And even for Mr. McConnell and Mr. Ryan, they've got to be the leaders of the House and the Senate, not just their parties. And that's what's best for the country. Now, one main reason I want to highlight that I voted no on the last 2 continuing resolutions is that our military leaders themselves have repeatedly warned us that continuing resolutions are bad for our national defense. Secretary Mattis, and who Mr. Trump calls General Mattis, but very qualified, right? He said last week or recently that inconsistent funding through continuing resolutions has undercut U.S. military readiness, and it's unfair to America's men and women in uniform. Still, this past weekend, Vice President Pence took a trip to the Middle East to blame Senate Democrats for the country not having a budget. Now, first of all, using our troops for partisan messaging on foreign soil is unbelievably bad and inappropriate. But the other thing is that the Vice President is the President of the Senate. And if he really wanted to help the troops, he should be here in D.C. with us, coming up with a real long-term plan, not overseas. And we can all agree that we need to do all we can to give our admirals and generals the certainty they need. I hear that in San Diego all the time. And we need to give our troops the best support we can give them. And I stand ready and willing to work to do just that at any time and at any place. And Speaker Ryan hasn't asked me, but if you want my vote, I'll support a budget that funds the national defense, increases our resiliency to disasters, invests in scientific research, helps San Diego deal with our cross-border sewage, and doesn't increase the national debt. So let's work together to find enough votes, Republican and Democrat, in both chambers to do what it takes to reopen the government and pass a budget for the rest of the year all the way to September 30th. Blaming other people from a continent thousands of miles away isn't the leadership this country deserves from the Vice President or any elected leader. And don't take it from me, take it from our military that needs a real budget. Finally, I want San Diegans to know that my office and I will continue to work on your behalf through any government shutdown. I was elected to serve you. It is my honor to do so, and I'll be here. Thanks.